You wake up in the middle of the night with your heart racing, not from a nightmare, but from a dream where everything you've ever wanted actually came true, where you finally achieved that impossible goal, where people knew your name, where your bank account reflected your worth, and instead of feeling joy, you felt terror. Pure, inexplicable terror that jolted you awake. If this sounds familiar, if you've ever found yourself sabotaging opportunities just as they were about to unfold, if you've noticed yourself making excuses when doors began to open, then you are not broken. You are not lazy. You are not destined for mediocrity. You are experiencing one of the most misunderstood psychological phenomena of our time. You fear success more than failure, and tonight we're going to uncover why. But before we dive into the depths of this paradox, let me tell you something that will shift your entire perspective. The fear of success isn't just an abstract concept discussed in psychology textbooks. It's an invisible force that has shaped the trajectory of your entire life without you even knowing it. Every promotion you didn't apply for, every creative project you abandoned halfway through, every relationship you sabotaged just as it was getting serious, every dream you convinced yourself was too big, too unrealistic, too much. These weren't random acts of self-doubt. They were carefully orchestrated performances by a part of your psyche that would rather keep you safe in familiar suffering than risk the unknown territory of actually getting what you want. Now I know what you're thinking. How can anyone fear success? Success is what everyone wants, right? Success means money, recognition, freedom, happiness. Why would anyone run from that? But here's what I've discovered after years of studying human behavior, after watching brilliant people destroy their own opportunities, after examining my own patterns of self-sabotage. The fear of success isn't about success itself. It's about what success demands of us. It's about who we would have to become to sustain it. It's about the terrifying possibility that we might actually deserve the good things we've been chasing. You see, failure has become comfortable. Familiar. Failure doesn't threaten your identity because you've built your entire sense of self around not being enough, around struggling, around almost making it, but not quite. Failure confirms what you've always suspected about yourself, what you've been told by family, by society, by that voice in your head that sounds suspiciously like every person who ever doubted you. But success? Success would shatter that carefully constructed image of who you think you are. Think about it. If you succeed, you can no longer hide behind the story of being the underdog. You can no longer use your circumstances as an excuse. You can no longer play small and blame it on bad luck or timing or other people's advantages. Success would demand that you acknowledge your own power, your own capability, your own worth. And for most of us, that's absolutely terrifying. But there's something deeper happening here, something that reaches into the very core of human psychology. We are wired for survival, not for thriving. Our brains are designed to keep us alive, not to make us happy. And for thousands of years, standing out meant becoming a target. Being different meant being cast out from the tribe. Excellence meant isolation. So when success starts knocking on your door, when your light begins to shine a little too brightly, every survival instinct you've inherited from your ancestors starts screaming at you to dim it down, to blend back in, to return to the safety of the middle. This is why you'll find yourself making strange decisions as you get closer to your goals. You'll start procrastinating on the final steps. You'll create drama in your personal life. You'll suddenly become interested in completely different pursuits. You'll develop mysterious illnesses or injuries. You'll pick fights with people who are trying to help you. Your computer will crash at the worst possible moment. Your car will break down on the day of the big interview. These aren't coincidences. They're your fear of success masquerading as external obstacles. I once worked with a woman who had spent 3 years writing a novel. It was brilliant, groundbreaking, the kind of book that could change lives. She had interest from agents. Publishers were already talking about it, and everyone who read it was blown away. But every time she got close to submitting the final manuscript, something would go wrong. Her laptop would mysteriously delete chapters. She'd decide the entire thing needed to be rewritten. She'd become convinced that it wasn't good enough, that she needed to do more research, that she was missing something crucial. This went on for 2 more years until one day, in a moment of brutal honesty, she admitted to me that she was terrified of what would happen if the book actually succeeded. What if people expected her to write another one? What if she couldn't live up to the attention? What if success changed her into someone she didn't recognize? That's the real fear underneath the fear of success. It's not about the money, or the recognition, or the opportunities. It's about the identity shift that success demands. It's about the death of who you used to be and the birth of who you're capable of becoming. And that transformation, that metamorphosis, feels like dying to the part of you that has found safety in limitation. Here's what makes this even more complex. Your fear of success isn't just personal, it's inherited, it's generational, it's cultural. You didn't just develop this fear in isolation. You absorbed it from family members who played small, who settled for less, who taught you that wanting more was selfish or dangerous. You learned it from a society that celebrates underdogs but quietly resents those who actually make it. You internalized it from every message you received about staying in your lane, not getting too big for your britches, remembering where you came from. And so you carry this invisible weight, this unconscious contract that says you're allowed to dream but not to achieve, allowed to want but not to have, allowed to try but not to succeed. You live in a perpetual state of almost, of not quite, of maybe next time. Because almost is safe, almost doesn't threaten anyone, almost doesn't require you to change. But here's what I want you to understand. This fear, this resistance, this self-sabotage, it's not your enemy. It's actually trying to protect you. It's the psychological equivalent of an overprotective parent who would rather keep you inside where it's safe than let you go out and explore the world where you might get hurt. Your fear of success is trying to save you from disappointment, from responsibility, from the possibility of failure after you've tasted victory. It's trying to preserve the version of you that feels familiar, even if that version is miserable. The problem is, this protective mechanism has become a prison. What once served to keep you safe now keeps you small. What once protected you from external threats now protects you from your own potential. And the longer you stay in this prison, the more you forget that you hold the key. So how do you begin to unlock these chains? How do you start to dismantle a fear so deeply embedded that you've mistaken it for wisdom? How do you separate the voice of genuine intuition from the voice of inherited limitation? The first step is recognition. You have to see the pattern before you can change it. You have to catch yourself in the act of self-sabotage. You have to notice the moment when you start making excuses, when you begin to pull back, when you feel that familiar urge to quit just before the breakthrough. But recognition alone isn't enough. You also have to understand what success would actually mean for you, not what you think it should mean, not what other people expect it to mean, but what it would genuinely represent in your life. Because here's the truth that no one talks about. Most people are chasing a version of success that isn't even theirs. They're pursuing someone else's definition of achievement, someone else's markers of worth, someone else's dreams. And no wonder they're terrified. They're afraid of succeeding at something that was never authentic to them in the first place. Real success, authentic success, isn't about conforming to external expectations. It's about becoming more fully yourself. It's about expressing your unique gifts in the world. It's about living in alignment with your deepest values and highest potential. And that kind of success, while still scary, carries a different energy. It feels like coming home to yourself rather than becoming someone you don't recognize. This is where the work begins. This is where you start to separate your authentic desires from the desires you think you should have. This is where you begin to question whether the success you're afraid of is actually the success you want. Because if you're pursuing achievement that doesn't align with who you really are, then of course your psyche is going to resist it. Of course you're going to sabotage it. Your inner wisdom is trying to save you from a life that would ultimately feel empty, even if you achieved everything you thought you wanted. But what if the success you're avoiding is actually the path to your truest self? What if everything you've been running from is exactly what your soul has been calling you toward? This is where the plot thickens, where the real mystery begins to unfold, because buried beneath your fear of success is something even more profound, something that will shake you to your core when you finally see it clearly. You don't just fear success. You fear your own power. You fear the magnitude of what you're capable of creating. You fear the responsibility that comes with knowing you have the ability to change not just your own life, but the lives of others. You fear the weight of your own potential, the enormity of your gifts, the scope of your possible impact. And most terrifying of all, you fear that once you step into that power, there will be no going back to the comfortable smallness you've known. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine for a moment that you achieved everything you've ever said you wanted: the career breakthrough, the financial freedom, the recognition, the love, the creative fulfillment. Now imagine walking into a room where everyone knows your name, where people look to you for answers, where your words carry weight, where your decisions affect others. Feel that weight settling on your shoulders. Feel the eyes watching, the expectations rising, the pressure mounting. This is what your unconscious mind has been trying to protect you from. Not the success itself, but the responsibility that success demands. Because success isn't just about getting what you want. Success is about becoming the person capable of handling what you want. And that person, that version of you who can sustain achievement, who can navigate power without losing yourself, who can handle praise without becoming arrogant and criticism without being destroyed, that person might feel like a stranger. They might have different habits, different boundaries, different relationships. They might have to say no to people you've always said yes to. They might have to speak truths you've kept hidden. They might have to make decisions that disappoint others in order to honor themselves. This is the metamorphosis your psyche is resisting. Not the external trappings of success, but the internal transformation it requires. And here's what makes it even more complex. You've been programmed to believe that if you change too much, if you grow too much, if you become too successful, you'll lose the people you love. You'll outgrow your relationships. You'll become isolated in your achievement. You'll be surrounded by people who want something from you rather than people who truly see you. And you know what? Some of that might be true. Success does change things. It does shift dynamics. Some people might feel threatened by your growth and pull away. Some relationships that were based on mutual limitation might not survive your expansion. Some family members might feel judged by your choices, even when you never intended judgment. Some friends might project their own fears onto your journey and try to talk you back into playing small. But here's what your fear doesn't want you to realize. The people who truly love you, who genuinely want the best for you, who see your authentic self beyond your circumstances, those people will celebrate your success. They'll be inspired by your courage to grow. They'll feel permission to expand their own lives because you've shown them it's possible. The relationships you lose through success were never really serving your highest good anyway. They were based on shared limitation rather than shared love. Still, the fear persists because deep down, you suspect that success might reveal something about you that you're not ready to face. What if you succeed and discover you're not as humble as you thought? What if achievement brings out aspects of your personality that you've judged in others? What if you become demanding, entitled, disconnected from your roots? What if success changes you into someone you don't like? These fears aren't irrational. They're based on real observations of how success has corrupted others, how power has inflated egos, how achievement has created distance between people and their humanity. You've seen celebrities self-destruct, entrepreneurs become ruthless, artists lose their authenticity after commercial success. You've witnessed how money can make people paranoid, how fame can create addiction, how recognition can feed narcissism, and some part of you has decided it's safer to avoid the test altogether than risk failing it. But here's the paradox within the paradox. The very fact that you're worried about how success might change you is evidence that you have the awareness to navigate it consciously. People who become corrupted by success are usually those who were already carrying unconscious shadows that power simply amplified. They weren't afraid of success changing them because they weren't paying attention to the process of change. You, on the other hand, are already examining your motivations, questioning your desires, worrying about the impact of achievement on your character. That level of self-awareness is actually your protection against the negative aspects of success you fear. And there's something else your fear doesn't want you to acknowledge. You're not just afraid of becoming someone you don't like through success. You're afraid of discovering that you actually deserve it. You're afraid of finding out that your dreams weren't too big, that your goals weren't unrealistic, that your vision for your life was actually attainable all along. Because if that's true, then you have to face a devastating question. How much of your life have you wasted believing you weren't good enough? How many opportunities did you miss because you convinced yourself they weren't for someone like you? How many times did you settle for less because you thought less was all you deserved? This realization can feel like a death. The death of the story you've been telling yourself about your limitations. The death of the excuses that have kept you safe from trying. the death of the identity you've built around struggle and almost but not quite. And deaths, even symbolic ones, are terrifying, even when they're necessary for rebirth. Your fear of success is ultimately a fear of your own magnificence. It's a terror of stepping into the fullness of who you really are. It's resistance to claiming your birthright of joy, abundance, creativity, and impact. Because somewhere along the way, you were taught that wanting those things was selfish, that having them was greedy, that believing you deserved them was arrogant. You were conditioned to believe that suffering was noble, that struggle was virtuous, that playing small was humble. But what if that conditioning was wrong? What if your desires aren't selfish but sacred? What if your dreams aren't ego-driven but soul-guided? What if your success wouldn't separate you from others but inspire them? What if achieving your potential isn't about becoming someone different, but about becoming more authentically yourself? The truth is, you came into this world with gifts, unique talents, perspectives, ways of being that no one else can offer. When you hide those gifts, when you dim your light, when you play smaller than you are, you're not just depriving yourself of fulfillment. You're depriving the world of what you came here to give. Your success isn't just about you. It's about everyone whose life could be touched, improved, or transformed by what you have to offer when you're operating at your highest level. This is the shift that changes everything. When you stop seeing success as something you take from the world and start seeing it as something you give to the world. When you stop viewing achievement as self-serving and start understanding it as service. When you realize that your fear of success isn't protecting you from becoming selfish, but preventing you from becoming generous with your gifts. But even with this realization, the fear doesn't just disappear, because now you're facing an even bigger terror, the terror of responsibility. If your success could genuinely help others, if your achievement could make a real difference, if your gifts could change lives, then what happens if you don't step up? What happens if you let fear win? What happens if you take your potential to the grave? This is where the real work begins. Not just recognizing your fear of success, not just understanding where it comes from, but choosing to move forward in spite of it. Choosing to honor your gifts even when it feels dangerous. Choosing to claim your power even when it feels overwhelming. Choosing to step into your magnificence even when every cell in your body is screaming at you to stay small. Because here's what I've discovered in the darkest moments of my own resistance, in the spaces between wanting and having, between dreaming and becoming. The fear of success isn't just psychological, it's archetypal. It lives in the collective unconscious of humanity, passed down through generations like a genetic memory. Your ancestors who dared to stand out were often the ones who didn't survive. The tall poppy gets cut down. The nail that sticks out gets hammered. The bright flame gets snuffed out by those who prefer darkness. And so you carry within your cellular memory the knowledge that visibility equals vulnerability, that excellence invites attack, that success makes you a target. Your nervous system remembers what your mind has forgotten, that in tribal times being cast out meant death, that drawing too much attention could mean persecution, that having more than others could trigger their envy, their resentment, their desire to tear you down to their level. This ancient programming doesn't distinguish between then and now. It doesn't understand that the world has changed, that success in modern times doesn't necessarily equal exile or execution. All it knows is that when you start to rise, when you begin to shine, when you step into your power, something deep and primal inside you starts sending alarm signals. Danger, threat, retreat. I remember working with a brilliant artist whose paintings could move people to tears. She had gallery owners calling, collectors interested, critics praising her work. But every time an opportunity presented itself, she would find reasons to decline. The timing wasn't right. She needed to perfect her technique. She wasn't ready for that level of exposure. What she couldn't see was that her hesitation wasn't about readiness, it was about terror. Terror that success would make her visible to forces she couldn't control, to energies that might destroy her. One night, she brought me a dream that changed everything. In the dream, she was standing on a stage, bathed in spotlight, her paintings displayed around her. The audience was applauding, but as she looked closer, she realized their faces were twisted with envy and rage. They began throwing stones, trying to destroy her art, trying to drag her down from the stage. She woke up screaming, her body drenched in sweat, her heart pounding with the certainty that success would make her a target for destruction. This dream wasn't just personal, it was archetypal. It was tapping into the collective memory of every artist, every innovator, every visionary who had ever been attacked for daring to create something beautiful in a world that often prefers ugliness. Her unconscious was showing her the price of visibility, the cost of excellence, the danger of stepping into her full creative power. But here's what she learned, and what you must learn too. The dream wasn't a warning to avoid success. It was an invitation to prepare for it differently. To understand that success doesn't just require talent or skill or opportunity. It requires a kind of spiritual fortification, an inner strength that can withstand the projections of others, the attacks of those who would rather see you fail than be reminded of their own unrealized potential. Your fear of success is, at its core, a fear of being seen. Really seen, not just for your accomplishments, but for the magnitude of who you are. Because when you succeed authentically, when you step fully into your power, you become a mirror. You reflect back to others what's possible for them. And for those who have made peace with their limitations, who have settled into the comfort of their cages, your success becomes a painful reminder of their own unlived lives. This is why successful people often feel lonely. Not because success inherently isolates, but because it reveals the gap between those who are willing to grow and those who are committed to staying the same. When you evolve, when you expand, when you become more than you were, you naturally move into different energetic frequencies. You start vibrating at levels that don't match everyone around you, and your unconscious mind, brilliant in its protective instincts, would rather keep you vibrating at familiar frequencies than risk the isolation that growth might bring. It would rather maintain connections based on shared limitation than face the possibility of connections based on shared expansion. Because at least in limitation, you know where you stand. At least in struggle, you have companions. At least in playing small, you belong somewhere. But what if I told you that this belonging built on mutual limitation is actually a form of spiritual imprisonment? What if the connections you're afraid of losing through success are the very bonds that are keeping you from your destiny? What if the people who would be threatened by your growth are precisely the ones whose opinions you should stop considering when making decisions about your life? This doesn't mean becoming callous or uncaring. It means recognizing that your primary responsibility is to your own soul's evolution, to the full expression of your gifts, to the completion of whatever you came here to accomplish. Everyone else's comfort with your growth is secondary. Everyone else's ability to handle your success is not your concern. Your job is to become who you are, not to manage other people's feelings about who you're becoming. Yet, even knowing this intellectually, the fear persists. Because success demands something that terrifies most people more than failure ever could. It demands that you take full ownership of your life. When you're struggling, when you're failing, when you're stuck, you can always point to external circumstances. Bad luck, wrong timing, other people's advantages, systemic barriers, family dysfunction, past trauma. And while these factors are real and valid, they also provide a kind of psychological shelter. They explain why things aren't working without requiring you to examine what you might be doing or not doing to create your reality. But success strips away these comfortable explanations. Success forces you to confront the terrifying possibility that you have more control over your life than you want to admit. That your thoughts create your reality. That your beliefs shape your experiences. That your choices determine your outcomes. Success demands that you step out of victim consciousness and into creator consciousness. And for most people, that level of responsibility feels overwhelming, because if you're truly the creator of your experience, then you're also responsible for everything you haven't created yet. Every dream left unrealized, every goal abandoned, every opportunity missed, they all become reflections of your choices rather than evidence of your circumstances. This realization can be crushing. It can make you want to crawl back into the safety of believing that life happens to you rather than through you. I've watched people achieve breakthrough success only to immediately sabotage it because they couldn't handle the weight of knowing they had created it. They couldn't reconcile their new reality with their old story about themselves. They couldn't integrate their achievement with their identity. So they found ways to lose what they had gained, to return to familiar territory, to prove to themselves and others that their success was just a fluke, an accident, a temporary deviation from their true nature. This is the deepest layer of the fear of success. It's a fear of your own power to create reality. It's terror at discovering that you are not a victim of circumstances, but a co-creator of your experience. It's the overwhelming realization that if you can succeed once, if you can manifest one dream, then you can probably manifest others. And if that's true, then what excuse do you have for not living the life you truly want? Your success becomes proof of your creative capacity, and your creative capacity is the most dangerous thing you can acknowledge about yourself. Because once you know you can create, once you understand that your thoughts and beliefs and actions shape your reality, then you can never again pretend to be powerless. You can never again hide behind the story that life is just something that happens to you. You become accountable for your experiences in a way that can feel terrifying. This is why many people unconsciously choose struggle over success. Struggle allows them to maintain the illusion of powerlessness. Struggle lets them stay in victim consciousness where nothing is their fault and everything is someone else's responsibility. Success, on the other hand, thrusts them into creator consciousness where everything becomes their responsibility, where every outcome reflects their inner state, where every experience mirrors their beliefs back to them. And creator consciousness, while ultimately liberating, can feel like a burden too heavy to bear. Because if you're creating your reality, then you're also creating your problems. If you're manifesting your experiences, then you're also manifesting your pain. If you're choosing your outcomes, then you're also choosing your limitations. This level of self-responsibility can make failure feel like the safer option. But here's what changes everything: what transforms the fear from a prison into a pathway. You don't have to carry this responsibility alone. You don't have to figure out how to create success through willpower and determination and individual effort. Because true success, lasting success, authentic success doesn't come from forcing outcomes through personal will. It comes from aligning with something larger than yourself, from becoming a channel for energies and purposes that transcend your individual ego. When you stop trying to create success for yourself and start allowing success to create itself through you, everything shifts. The weight of responsibility lifts because you're no longer the sole architect of your achievement. You become a collaborator with life, a partner with the universe, a vessel for forces that want to express themselves through your unique gifts and talents. This is where the fear begins to transform into excitement. Because instead of being terrified of what you might have to become to sustain success, you start getting curious about what wants to emerge through you. Instead of worrying about whether you deserve achievement, you begin wondering what achievements are trying to find you. Instead of fearing the responsibility of creating your reality, you start embracing your role as a co-creator with intelligence far greater than your individual mind. But even with this understanding, even with the recognition that success can flow through you rather than from you, the fear doesn't simply evaporate. Because there's another layer beneath all of this, something so fundamental to human experience that most people never even recognize it's there. You don't just fear success because of what it might demand of you, or because of how it might change you, or because of the responsibility it might bring. You fear success because somewhere deep in your psyche, you believe that getting what you want will somehow break the universe. I know this sounds absurd, but follow me into this deeper territory. From the time you were a child, you absorbed messages about balance, about fairness, about not taking more than your share. You learned that if you have too much, someone else must have too little. If you shine too brightly, you're stealing light from others. If you claim too much joy, you're somehow responsible for other people's suffering. These beliefs lodge themselves in your unconscious like splinters, creating a subtle but persistent sense that your success comes at someone else's expense. This is the guilt that lives beneath the fear. The unconscious conviction that your achievement will somehow harm others, that your abundance will create scarcity elsewhere, that your happiness will contribute to someone else's misery. So you limit yourself not out of humility, but out of a misguided sense of cosmic responsibility. You play small because you believe the universe only has so much good to go around, and taking your share means less for everyone else. But what if this belief is not just wrong, but backwards? What if your success actually creates more possibility for others rather than less? What if your achievement opens doors that wouldn't exist otherwise? What if your abundance generates opportunities that benefit people you'll never even meet? What if the universe isn't a zero-sum game, but an infinite field of potential, where one person's expansion actually enlarges the space for everyone else's growth? I once worked with an entrepreneur who had built a revolutionary technology that could change entire industries. He had investors lined up, customers eager to buy, team members ready to scale. But every time he got close to launching, he would find reasons to delay. More testing needed, more features to add, more market research to conduct. What he couldn't articulate was that somewhere deep inside, he felt like he was stealing. Not money or ideas, but possibility itself. Like his success would somehow diminish the universe's capacity to provide for others. One day, exhausted from his own resistance, he asked me a question that cut straight to the heart of his fear. What if I succeed and it ruins everything for everyone else? That question revealed the unconscious contract he had made with limitation. He would stay small to keep the universe balanced. He would sacrifice his potential to ensure there was enough potential left for others. He would dim his light so that other lights could shine. This is the martyr complex disguised as spiritual wisdom. This is self-sacrifice masquerading as compassion. This is the belief that your suffering somehow serves the greater good, that your limitation somehow protects others from lack. But here's what this entrepreneur discovered and what you must understand. The universe doesn't work through scarcity, it works through abundance. Your success doesn't subtract from the total amount of success available. It adds to it. It proves that success is possible, that dreams can manifest, that potential can be realized. When you achieve something significant, you're not taking that achievement away from someone else. You're demonstrating that such achievements exist in the field of possibility. You're making it easier for others to believe in their own potential. You're expanding the collective understanding of what's achievable. Every person who breaks through a barrier makes it easier for the next person to break through the same barrier. Every individual who transcends their limitations increases the likelihood that others will transcend theirs. But your unconscious mind doesn't think in terms of collective expansion. It thinks in terms of tribal survival. And from that perspective, standing out from the group feels dangerous not just to you, but to the group itself. Your primitive brain believes that if you rise too high, you'll attract predators that will threaten everyone. If you accumulate too much, you'll create envy that will tear the community apart. If you become too powerful, you'll upset the delicate balance that keeps the tribe safe. This ancient programming runs so deep that you might not even recognize when it's operating. You'll find yourself downplaying your achievements to avoid triggering others' insecurity. You'll deflect compliments to prevent accusations of arrogance. You'll share credit even when you did most of the work. You'll apologize for your success as if it were a crime. You'll constantly reassure others that you haven't changed, that you're still the same person, that your achievement doesn't make you better than anyone else. All of these behaviors stem from the unconscious fear that your success will somehow destabilize the social order, that your light will create shadows that others will get lost in, that your expansion will somehow contract the possibilities available to everyone else. But what you're actually doing through these behaviors is limiting not just yourself, but the very people you think you're protecting. When you dim your light to avoid outshining others, you rob them of the inspiration your full radiance could provide. When you downplay your achievements to avoid triggering insecurity, you deprive others of the motivation that comes from seeing what's possible. When you apologize for your success, you reinforce the belief that achievement is something to be ashamed of rather than celebrated. You think you're being considerate, but you're actually being condescending. You're assuming others can't handle your success, that they're too fragile to witness your full potential, that they need your protection from your own magnificence. But the people who truly love you, who genuinely want the best for you, don't need protection from your success. They need inspiration from it. They need proof that transformation is possible, that dreams can come true, that limitations can be transcended. They need you to model what it looks like to step fully into your power, to claim your gifts, to live authentically and abundantly. The fear of success becomes even more complex when you consider what success might reveal about the people around you. Because when you succeed, you don't just change the way others see you, you change the way you see others. You start to notice who celebrates your victories and who finds ways to diminish them. You observe who feels inspired by your growth and who feels threatened by it. You recognize who encourages your expansion and who tries to keep you contained. This revelation can be devastating. People you thought were allies reveal themselves to be secretly invested in your limitation. Family members who claim to want the best for you start making comments designed to bring you back down to their level. Friends who seemed supportive begin distancing themselves or making passive-aggressive remarks about how you've changed. Colleagues who appeared collaborative start undermining your efforts or spreading gossip about your methods. Your unconscious mind, ever vigilant for threats to your survival, anticipates this social reorganization and tries to protect you from it by keeping you from succeeding in the first place. It would rather maintain false harmony based on shared limitation than risk authentic relationships based on mutual growth. It would rather preserve connections that require you to stay small than discover connections that celebrate your expansion. But here's the paradox your fear doesn't want you to see. The relationships you lose through success weren't really serving you anyway. They were based on you being less than you are, on you hiding parts of yourself, on you managing other people's comfort at the expense of your own growth. These weren't relationships with the real you. They were relationships with a diminished version of yourself that you created to avoid triggering others' insecurities. When you succeed authentically, when you step into your full power, you attract different people into your life. People who are also growing, also expanding, also committed to becoming more than they were. You find yourself surrounded by individuals who celebrate achievement rather than resent it, who feel inspired by success rather than threatened by it, who encourage your growth rather than try to contain it. This shift in your social constellation can feel disorienting, like you're losing your tribe and haven't yet found a new one. There's often a period of loneliness as you transition from relationships based on limitation to relationships based on potential. Your old friends might not understand your new interests, your family might feel confused by your changing priorities, your colleagues might feel left behind by your accelerated growth. But this transition, while uncomfortable, is necessary for your evolution. You can't expand beyond your current level while maintaining all the same connections that existed at your previous level. Some relationships will grow with you, some will fall away, and new ones will emerge. This isn't a failure of loyalty or love. It's the natural consequence of growth. It's the price of becoming who you're meant to be. The fear of this social reorganization keeps many people trapped in patterns of underachievement. They would rather maintain familiar relationships than risk the uncertainty of new ones. They would rather stay connected to people who keep them small than face the possibility of temporary isolation while they find people who celebrate their bigness. They choose the comfort of known limitation over the adventure of unknown expansion. But what they don't realize is that by staying small to preserve relationships, they're not actually preserving anything real. They're maintaining illusions, performing versions of themselves that aren't authentic, living half-lives to avoid threatening others' comfort zones. And the people they're trying not to lose, those people aren't connecting with the real them anyway. They're connecting with a carefully constructed persona designed to make others feel safe. True intimacy requires authenticity. Real connection demands that you show up as you actually are, not as you think others need you to be. When you dim your light to avoid outshining others, you're not being loving. You're being dishonest. You're depriving others of the opportunity to connect with your true self. And you're depriving yourself of the chance to be loved for who you really are rather than who you pretend to be. This is where the work of success becomes not just personal, but relational. Not just about achieving your goals, but about learning to maintain your authenticity while navigating the complex dynamics that success creates. It's about developing the courage to let people be uncomfortable with your growth rather than sacrificing your expansion to manage their feelings. It's about trusting that the right people will stay and the wrong people will go, and that both outcomes serve your highest good. But even with this understanding, even with the willingness to let relationships reorganize around your authentic self, the fear of success continues to manifest in subtle ways. Because there's something about achievement that forces you to confront not just who you are now, but who you've always been. Success has a way of illuminating your entire history, casting new light on every choice you've made, every opportunity you've missed, every moment you've played smaller than necessary. When you finally succeed at something significant, when you break through a major barrier, when you achieve what once seemed impossible, you can't help but look back and wonder, if I was capable of this all along, why did I wait so long? If I had these abilities, why did I hide them? If I could create this outcome, why did I accept lesser outcomes for so many years? If I was this powerful, why did I pretend to be powerless? These questions can create a kind of retroactive grief, a mourning for the years you spent believing you were less than you are. You start to see all the times you settled for less because you thought less was all you deserved. All the opportunities you declined because you thought they were beyond your capabilities. All the dreams you abandoned because you thought they were unrealistic. All the relationships you accepted that didn't truly honor you because you thought you couldn't attract better ones. This grief is part of the success process, but it's also part of why your unconscious mind resists success. It knows that achievement will force you to confront the gap between who you've been and who you're capable of being. It knows that success will reveal the cost of your self-limitation, the price of your playing small, the toll of your diminished expectations, and it tries to protect you from that painful recognition by keeping you from succeeding in the first place. But this grief, while painful, is also sacred. It's the mourning that allows rebirth. It's the death of old identities that makes space for new ones. It's the recognition of what was lost that enables the appreciation of what's being found. When you can hold this grief with compassion rather than judgment. When you can honor the part of you that stayed small without condemning it. when you can forgive yourself for the years of self-limitation, then you can move forward without the weight of regret. Because here's what that grief is trying to teach you. You weren't wrong to play small. You weren't stupid to limit yourself. You weren't weak to avoid your power. You were responding to real threats, real conditioning, real circumstances that made expansion feel dangerous. You were surviving as best you knew how with the tools and understanding you had at the time. The part of you that chose limitation was trying to protect you, and it deserves gratitude, not criticism. But now you're ready for something different. Now you have new tools, new understanding, new support systems. Now the threats that once made limitation necessary have dissolved or transformed. Now the circumstances that required you to play small have shifted. Now you can choose expansion without the same risks that once made it dangerous. This is the moment of choice that every person encounters when they stand at the threshold of their own success. Do you honor the protection that limitation once provided while stepping into the possibilities that expansion now offers? Do you thank the part of you that kept you safe while embracing the part of you that's ready to soar? Do you integrate your history of playing small with your potential for being big? This integration is what transforms the fear of success from a barrier into a bridge. When you can hold both your past self-limitation and your current potential with equal compassion, when you can see your journey towards success as evolution rather than correction, when you can understand your resistance as sacred protection rather than shameful weakness, then you can move toward your goals with wholeness rather than conflict. The fear begins to soften when you realize that success isn't about becoming someone different. It's about becoming more fully yourself. It's about expressing the gifts you've always carried, but perhaps kept hidden. It's about living the life your soul has always wanted, but your mind has been afraid to claim. It's about stepping into the fullness of who you've always been underneath the layers of conditioning, limitation, and protective smallness. Your success isn't separate from you. It's not something foreign that will transform you into a stranger. It's something that's been waiting inside you, something that's been calling to you, something that's been trying to emerge through you. When you understand success as self-expression rather than self-transformation, as revelation rather than revolution, as homecoming rather than departure, then the fear loses much of its power. Because you're not afraid of becoming someone you don't know. You're afraid of revealing someone you've always known, but have been afraid to let others see. You're not terrified of success changing you into someone unrecognizable. You're terrified of success revealing the magnificent being you've been hiding, even from yourself. This is the deepest truth about the fear of success, the one that lives beneath all the other layers, beneath the concern about responsibility and change and social dynamics and cosmic balance. You're not afraid of failing to handle success. You're afraid of succeeding so completely that you can no longer pretend you don't know how powerful you really are. You are afraid of discovering that your dreams weren't fantasies but blueprints, that your visions weren't escapism but glimpses of what's actually possible, that your deepest longings weren't naive wishful thinking but your soul's memory of what you came here to create. Because if that's true, if your biggest dreams are actually attainable, then you have to face the most terrifying realization of all. You've been capable of extraordinary things this entire time. This is why success feels like a death sentence to your current identity. Not because achievement will destroy you, but because it will reveal you. It will strip away every excuse, every limitation, every story you've told yourself about why your life couldn't be different. Success will expose the uncomfortable truth that you've been choosing your circumstances more than you've been chosen by them. And there's something even more unsettling waiting beneath this revelation. When you finally achieve something significant, when you break through a barrier you thought was permanent, when you manifest what you once believed was impossible, you discover that the process wasn't as difficult as you imagined. The steps weren't as complex as you anticipated. The requirements weren't as demanding as you feared. You realize that what kept you from success wasn't lack of ability or opportunity or resources. What kept you from success was your commitment to believing it was out of reach. This recognition can be shattering, because if success was always more accessible than you believed, then what else have you been wrong about? What other limitations are actually choices? What other impossibilities are simply unexplored possibilities? The successful version of yourself becomes proof that your unsuccessful version was largely a performance, a carefully maintained illusion, a protective identity that kept you safe from having to discover what you're truly capable of. I remember working with a brilliant writer who had been struggling to finish her novel for 7 years. She had written hundreds of pages, created detailed character sketches, researched every historical detail, but every time she approached the final chapters, she would find new problems that required extensive revision. She convinced herself that perfection was necessary, that the work wasn't ready, that she needed more time to get it right. But when we excavated beneath her perfectionism, we discovered something startling. She wasn't afraid of writing a bad book. She was terrified of writing a good one, because a good book would prove that she had been capable of writing it all along. A successful novel would reveal that the 7 years of struggle weren't necessary preparation, but sophisticated avoidance. Achievement would force her to confront the uncomfortable possibility that she had been choosing delay, choosing revision, choosing preparation over completion. When she finally finished the book, when it was accepted by a publisher, when critics praised her work, she experienced something she didn't expect. Not joy, but grief. Grief for the years she had spent believing she wasn't ready when she had been ready all along. Grief for the elaborate stories she had constructed about why success was so difficult when it had been simpler than she imagined. Grief for the version of herself that had needed struggle to feel worthy of achievement. This is the existential crisis that success precipitates. It forces you to question not just what you're capable of, but what you've been choosing. It reveals the gap between your potential and your performance, between your abilities and your actions, between what's possible for you and what you've been willing to allow. Success becomes a mirror that reflects back not just your achievements, but your avoidance patterns, your delay tactics, your elaborate methods of self-limitation. And your unconscious mind, brilliant in its protective strategies, would rather maintain the illusion of incapacity than face the reality of wasted potential. It would rather keep you believing that success is difficult, that achievement requires special circumstances, that your dreams are impractical, than allow you to discover how much of your limitation has been self-imposed. But there's an even deeper layer to this resistance, something that touches the very core of human consciousness. Your fear of success isn't just about discovering your capabilities or confronting your choices. It's about recognizing that you are not who you think you are. that the small, struggling, limited version of yourself that you've identified with for so long isn't your true nature. That beneath the layers of conditioning and trauma and inherited beliefs, there exists a being of extraordinary power and potential. Success threatens your ego identity because it proves that you are more than your story, more than your past, more than your circumstances, more than the collection of experiences and wounds and beliefs that you've mistaken for your essential self. When you achieve something significant, when you break through what you thought were permanent limitations, when you create outcomes that seemed impossible, you catch a glimpse of your deeper nature. And that glimpse can be absolutely terrifying. Because if you're not the struggling person you thought you were, then who are you? If you're not limited by what you thought limited you, then what defines you? If you're not bound by the story you've been telling about yourself, then what story is actually true? Success forces you to question everything you thought you knew about your identity, your capabilities, your place in the world. This existential disorientation is why many people unconsciously sabotage themselves just as breakthrough becomes possible. They would rather maintain a familiar identity, even if it's limiting, than face the uncertainty of discovering who they really are beyond their limitations. They choose the comfort of known struggle over the adventure of unknown potential. The successful version of yourself isn't just someone who has achieved more. They are someone who has recognized that achievement was always possible, that limitation was largely chosen, that the small self was a protective fiction rather than an ultimate truth. And stepping into that recognition requires a kind of spiritual courage that most people aren't prepared to summon. You have to be willing to let everything you thought you knew about yourself die. You have to be prepared to discover that your deepest beliefs about your capabilities were wrong. You have to be ready to face the possibility that you've been living far below your potential, not because of external circumstances, but because of internal choices. You have to be willing to grieve the years you spent believing you were less than you are. This death and rebirth process is what makes success feel so dangerous. It's not just about achieving goals or accumulating accomplishments. It's about dying to one version of yourself and being born as another. It's about letting go of familiar limitations and embracing unfamiliar possibilities. It's about releasing the identity you've known and stepping into one you've only imagined. And the process doesn't end with a single achievement. Each level of success demands another death, another rebirth, another letting go of what you thought was possible to embrace what's actually available. Success becomes an ongoing process of shedding identities, transcending beliefs, expanding beyond what you thought were permanent boundaries. This is why the fear of success is so persistent, so layered, so complex. It's not just one fear, but a constellation of fears, each one protecting you from a different aspect of your potential. Fear of responsibility, fear of change, fear of visibility, fear of power, fear of your own magnificence. Each layer must be faced, honored, and integrated as you move toward the fullness of who you're capable of becoming. But here's what transforms the entire process from terrifying to exhilarating. You don't have to face these fears alone. You don't have to navigate this transformation in isolation. There are others who have walked this path before you, who understand the complexity of claiming your power, who can offer guidance and support as you move through your own process of becoming. The journey towards success is ultimately a journey toward your authentic self, not the self you've constructed to survive or to please others or to fit in, but the self you were before the world told you to be smaller. The self that exists beyond fear, beyond limitation, beyond the stories that have kept you confined. The self that has always known you were capable of extraordinary things, even when your mind couldn't believe it. When you begin to align with this deeper self, when you start making choices from this place of expanded identity, when you allow yourself to be guided by your authentic desires rather than your inherited limitations, success stops feeling like something foreign and starts feeling like homecoming. You're not becoming someone new. You're remembering who you've always been. The fear begins to transform into excitement because you realize that success isn't about proving yourself to others or meeting external expectations or accumulating achievements to feel worthy. Success is about expressing your gifts, sharing your unique perspective, contributing your particular magic to the world. It's about living in alignment with your deepest values, your highest vision, your most authentic self. This shift in understanding changes everything. Instead of fearing what success might do to you, you start getting curious about what wants to express itself through you. Instead of worrying about whether you deserve achievement, you begin wondering what achievements are trying to find you. Instead of being terrified of your power, you start getting excited about how you might use it. But even with this shift, even with this recognition of success as self-expression rather than self-transformation, the journey remains complex, because living authentically in a world that often rewards conformity requires courage. Expressing your unique gifts in a culture that sometimes punishes individuality demands strength. Standing in your power in relationships and situations that have been built around your powerlessness necessitates boundaries. The successful version of yourself will need to say no to things that the struggling version said yes to. They will need to set standards that the limiting version was afraid to maintain. They will need to make choices that honor their authentic desires rather than manage other people's comfort. They will need to disappoint some people in order to be true to themselves. This is where success becomes not just personal, but political, not just individual, but collective. Because when you refuse to play small, when you claim your power, when you express your gifts fully, you give permission for others to do the same. Your success becomes a form of activism, a way of challenging the systems and beliefs that keep people confined to lesser versions of themselves. But this also means that your success will be threatening to those who benefit from your limitation, to systems that profit from your small thinking, to relationships that depend on your self-sacrifice, to cultures that maintain control through keeping individuals disconnected from their power. Your authentic success becomes a form of revolution, whether you intend it that way or not. This is why the fear of success runs so deep, why it touches something primal in human consciousness. It's not just personal fear, but collective fear. Not just individual resistance, but systemic resistance. When you step into your full power, you don't just change your own life. You change the dynamic of every system you're part of. You shift the energy of every relationship you're in. You challenge the assumptions of every community you belong to. Your unconscious mind senses this larger disruption and tries to protect you from it. It knows that authentic success will make you a catalyst for change, a force for transformation, a mirror that reflects back to others what they've been avoiding in themselves. And it tries to keep you safe by keeping you small, contained within familiar limitations where you won't threaten the established order. But here's what your protective instincts don't understand. The world needs your success, not the shallow, ego-driven success that comes from trying to prove your worth or accumulate status, but the deep, soul-sourced success that comes from expressing your authentic gifts and living your genuine purpose. The world needs what you came here to contribute, the unique perspective you're here to share, the particular healing you're here to offer. When you withhold your gifts out of fear, when you play smaller than you are to avoid threatening others, when you limit your success to manage other people's comfort, you're not just depriving yourself of fulfillment. You're depriving the world of what it needs for its own healing and evolution. You're keeping medicine that others need locked away in the vault of your unexpressed potential. This is the final understanding that transforms fear into purpose. Your success isn't just about you, it's about everyone whose life could be touched by what you have to offer when you're operating at your highest level. Every person who could be inspired by your courage to grow. Every individual who could be helped by your willingness to share your gifts. Every soul who could be awakened by your example of living authentically. When you understand success as service rather than selfishness, as contribution rather than accumulation, as expression rather than acquisition, the fear begins to dissolve. Because you're no longer pursuing success to fill a void or prove a point or meet an expectation. You're claiming your power to give your gifts more fully, to serve your purpose more completely, to love the world more effectively. This is where the real work begins, not just overcoming the fear of success, but understanding what authentic success actually means for you. Not what others have defined it as, not what society has convinced you to want, not what your wounded parts think will finally make you worthy, but what your deepest self knows you came here to create, to express, to become. The journey toward this authentic success requires a different kind of courage than the journey toward conventional achievement. It requires the willingness to disappoint others in order to honor yourself, the strength to stand alone when necessary rather than conform to belong, the faith to trust your inner knowing even when it contradicts external expectations. But it also offers something that conventional success never can: the deep satisfaction of knowing you're living in alignment with your true nature, the quiet confidence that comes from expressing your authentic gifts, the profound peace of knowing you're contributing what you came here to contribute, the joy of discovering that who you really are is far more magnificent than who you thought you had to become. This is the success that your soul has been calling you toward all along. Not the success that looks impressive to others, but the success that feels authentic to you. Not the achievement that meets external standards, but the expression that honors internal truth. Not the accumulation that fills outer lack, but the manifestation that expresses inner fullness. And the beautiful paradox is that when you pursue this authentic success, when you focus on expressing your true gifts rather than meeting others' expectations, when you align with your genuine purpose rather than chasing borrowed dreams, you often find that external recognition and material abundance follow naturally, not as the goal but as the byproduct, not as what you're trying to create, but as what emerges when you're being who you really are. The fear of success begins to transform when you realize that what you've been afraid of isn't actually success at all. It's the inauthentic version of success that requires you to betray yourself to achieve it. The kind of achievement that demands you become someone you're not, that asks you to sacrifice your values for recognition, that insists you choose accomplishment over authenticity. But authentic success, success that emerges from your true nature rather than contradicting it, success that expresses your gifts rather than hiding them, success that serves your purpose rather than betraying it, this kind of success doesn't threaten your identity. It fulfills it. It doesn't force you to become someone else. It allows you to become more fully yourself. When you understand this distinction, when you can separate authentic success from its counterfeit versions, when you can pursue achievement that aligns with rather than contradicts your deepest values, the fear begins to lift. Because you're no longer afraid of success changing you into someone you don't recognize. You're excited about success revealing who you've always been beneath the layers of conditioning and limitation. This is the threshold you stand at now. Not just the choice between success and failure, but the choice between authentic expression and continued hiding, between claiming your gifts and keeping them buried, between stepping into your power and remaining in protective smallness, between living your truth and performing your limitations. The fear will still arise, the resistance will still surface. The voices that tell you to play it safe, to stay small, to avoid the risks of visibility and power and responsibility, they will still whisper their warnings. But now you understand what they're really protecting you from and why their protection, while once necessary, may no longer serve your highest good. The question is no longer whether you're capable of success. The evidence of your capability surrounds you in every breakthrough you've already achieved, every obstacle you've already overcome, every moment you've already transcended what seemed impossible. The question is whether you're willing to let success reveal the magnitude of who you really are. Because that's what authentic success does. It doesn't create your magnificence, it unveils it. It doesn't give you power. It reveals the power you've always carried. It doesn't make you worthy. It demonstrates the worth you've possessed all along. And stepping into that revelation, claiming that recognition, owning that truth about yourself, that is perhaps the most courageous act a human being can perform. The world is waiting for your courage, not just for your achievements or your accomplishments or your external success, but for your willingness to be who you really are, to express what you really came here to express, to contribute what only you can contribute. The world needs your authentic success because the world needs you, fully expressed, completely yourself, holding nothing back. This is your invitation, not just to overcome your fear of success, but to understand what success really means when it's aligned with your authentic self, to discover what becomes possible when you stop trying to become someone worthy of achievement and start recognizing that you're already someone whose achievement is inevitable. To step into the truth that your success isn't something you have to earn or deserve or prove yourself worthy of. It's something that wants to emerge through you when you stop standing in its way. The fear of success has served its purpose. It has protected you when protection was necessary. It has kept you safe when safety was required. It has helped you navigate a world that hasn't always been ready for your full expression. But now, perhaps it's time to thank that fear for its service and step into the possibility it was designed to protect you from discovering, that you are capable of far more than you've ever allowed yourself to imagine. Your entire nervous system was designed around a simple premise: survive at all costs, And for thousands of years, that programming served humanity well. The individuals who stood out too much became targets. The ones who accumulated too much resources attracted raiders. The ones who shone too brightly drew the attention of forces that would extinguish their light permanently. Your ancestors who lived to pass on their genes were the ones who learned to blend in, to share equally, to avoid drawing the wrath of those who preferred darkness to illumination. This ancient coding still runs through your veins like a river of caution. When you approach the threshold of significant achievement, when you begin to accumulate the resources or recognition or influence that would have once made you vulnerable to attack, every cell in your body starts sending alarm signals. Not because you're actually in danger now, but because your DNA remembers when you would have been. I've watched this play out in countless ways across the humans I've worked with. The entrepreneur who develops mysterious health issues just as their business is about to scale. The artist who becomes convinced their work isn't ready just as gallery owners start calling. The writer who finds endless reasons to revise their manuscript just as publishers express interest. The performer who loses their voice right before the audition that could change everything. These aren't coincidences, they're your survival system protecting you from the perceived dangers of visibility. But here's where it gets even more complex. Your fear of success isn't just about avoiding external threats. It's about maintaining the delicate ecosystem of relationships and identities that have kept you psychologically stable for years. You've built an entire life around being the person who struggles, who almost makes it, who has potential but never quite fulfills it. That identity has become so familiar, so comfortable, so integral to how you see yourself and how others see you, that success would require dismantling the very foundation of who you think you are. Consider the psychological investment you've made in your limitations. The stories you've told about why things don't work out, the explanations you've crafted for why you're stuck, the reasons you've given for why change is impossible, the relationships you've formed with others who share similar struggles, the communities you've joined based on mutual limitation, the support systems that exist to help you cope with not having what you want rather than helping you get it. All of this infrastructure would crumble if you suddenly succeeded. The friends who bond with you over shared frustration might not know how to relate to your accomplishment. The family members who've cast you in the role of the one who needs help might feel confused by your self-sufficiency. The mentors who've built their identity around guiding the lost might struggle to connect with your found state. The entire ecosystem of your current life is organized around your non-success, and your unconscious mind would rather preserve that familiar system than risk the chaos of reorganization. There's something even more unsettling lurking beneath this social fear. Success would force you to confront the uncomfortable possibility that your struggle has been, to some degree, chosen. Not consciously, not deliberately, but chosen nonetheless through the accumulation of small decisions, subtle resistances, and unconscious sabotages that have kept you exactly where you are. When you finally break through, when you achieve what you've been claiming to want, you can't help but look back and wonder, if I was capable of this breakthrough now, why didn't it happen sooner? This realization can be devastating because it suggests that your years of struggle weren't entirely imposed by external circumstances. They were, at least partially, the result of internal choices made by parts of yourself you weren't even aware existed. The part that found safety in limitation. The part that discovered identity in struggle. The part that learned to extract meaning from suffering. the part that became addicted to the drama of almost but not quite. I once worked with a brilliant musician who had been trying to record an album for 8 years. Every time he got close to completion, something would go wrong. Equipment would malfunction. Collaborators would disappoint him. Venues would cancel. Funding would fall through. He had accumulated an impressive collection of explanations for why his music hadn't reached the world, why his talent remained hidden, why his dreams stayed deferred. But when we excavated beneath these surface obstacles, we discovered something startling. Each setback had occurred just as he was approaching a level of completion that would have demanded he actually share his work with others. Each crisis had emerged precisely when he would have had to face the possibility of rejection, criticism, or worse, success. His unconscious mind had become masterful at creating circumstances that preserved his identity as the misunderstood artist while protecting him from the vulnerability of actually being understood. The breakthrough came when he recognized that his struggle wasn't happening to him but through him, that his obstacles weren't external forces conspiring against his success, but internal forces protecting him from it, that his delays weren't caused by bad luck but by good strategy if your goal is to avoid the risks that come with achievement. This recognition was initially crushing because it meant taking responsibility for years of self-limitation, but it was also liberating because it meant he had more power over his circumstances than he'd ever imagined. Your relationship with success is complicated by another layer of conditioning that runs even deeper than personal psychology. You've been marinating in cultural messages about achievement that are fundamentally contradictory. On one hand, you're told to pursue your dreams, follow your passion, reach for the stars. On the other hand, you're warned about the corrupting influence of success, the loneliness of achievement, the price of ambition. You're encouraged to want more while being cautioned about wanting too much. These mixed messages create a kind of psychological double bind. You're supposed to strive for success, but not appear too eager. You're expected to achieve, but remain humble. You're meant to accumulate wealth, but not become materialistic. You're encouraged to gain recognition, but warned against becoming egotistical. You're told to be confident, but not arrogant, ambitious but not selfish, successful but not changed by success. Navigating these contradictory expectations requires a level of psychological sophistication that most people haven't developed. So instead of learning to hold these paradoxes with nuance, you often resolve the tension by simply avoiding success altogether. If you never achieve significant recognition, you never have to worry about becoming arrogant. If you never accumulate substantial wealth, you never have to concern yourself with materialism. If you never gain real power, you never have to fear corruption. This avoidance strategy feels virtuous, even noble. You get to maintain your innocence, your purity, your connection to struggle and limitation. You can judge those who have what you claim to want while simultaneously feeling superior to their compromises. You can maintain the moral high ground of never having been tested by the temptations that come with achievement. You can remain good by staying small. But this goodness built on limitation is actually a form of spiritual bypassing. It's using the appearance of virtue to avoid the complexity of actually living in the world with power, influence, and resources. It's choosing the safety of moral certainty over the messiness of moral nuance. It's preferring the simplicity of powerlessness to the responsibility of empowerment. True spiritual development doesn't come from avoiding the tests that success brings. It comes from facing those tests with consciousness, with integrity, with the willingness to remain authentic, even when you have the power to be otherwise. The person who never faces temptation hasn't proven their virtue. They've simply avoided the arena where virtue is actually tested. This is why your fear of success often masks itself as spiritual wisdom. The part of you that resists achievement tells you it's protecting your soul from corruption, preserving your authenticity from contamination, keeping your heart pure from the toxins of worldly success. But what it's actually doing is protecting you from the spiritual growth that comes from learning to wield power responsibly, to handle abundance gracefully, to maintain your humanity while navigating the complexities that success inevitably brings. The spiritual path doesn't lead away from success, but through it, not around the challenges of achievement, but into them. Not above the temptations of power, but beyond them. The goal isn't to avoid the tests that success brings, but to pass them with your soul intact. And you can't pass tests you refuse to take. This reframe changes everything about your relationship with achievement. Instead of seeing success as a threat to your spiritual development, you begin to understand it as an opportunity for spiritual refinement. Instead of viewing achievement as a distraction from your authentic self, you recognize it as a laboratory for expressing your authentic self under pressure. Instead of fearing that success will change you, you become curious about how you might remain unchanged by it. But even with this understanding, even with the recognition that success can be a spiritual path rather than a spiritual obstacle, the fear persists because there's another layer of resistance that lives even deeper in your psyche. You don't just fear success because of what it might do to you, or how it might change your relationships, or whether you can handle it spiritually. You fear success because achieving it would prove something about reality that your mind isn't ready to accept. If you can succeed, if you can manifest your dreams, if you can create outcomes that seem impossible, then it means the universe is far more responsive to human consciousness than you've been taught to believe. It means your thoughts have more power than you've been told. It means your beliefs shape reality more directly than you've been conditioned to accept. It means you live in a cosmos that's fundamentally creative, abundant, and oriented toward the fulfillment of authentic desire rather than the punishment of human ambition. This recognition would require you to completely restructure your understanding of how reality works. Instead of seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances, you'd have to acknowledge yourself as a co-creator of experience. Instead of believing that good things are scarce and must be earned through suffering, you'd have to accept that abundance is natural and available through alignment. Instead of thinking that you're small and powerless in an indifferent universe, you'd have to embrace the terrifying truth that you're vast and influential in a responsive cosmos. Most people are not prepared for this level of responsibility. It's easier to believe that life happens to you than through you. It's more comfortable to think that success requires special circumstances than to accept that it emerges from consciousness. It's safer to assume that achievement is rare and difficult than to discover that it's natural and available. So you unconsciously choose limitation, not because you can't create success, but because succeeding would force you to confront the magnitude of your creative power. I've worked with individuals who've achieved breakthrough success only to immediately begin the process of dismantling it. They couldn't integrate the reality that they had actually created their desired outcome through their focused intention, aligned action, and sustained belief. The achievement felt too magical, too impossible, too threatening to their worldview, so they found ways to lose what they had gained, to return to familiar struggle, to prove to themselves that their success was just a fluke rather than evidence of their inherent creative capacity. This is perhaps the most tragic form of self-sabotage because it's not just about avoiding success. It's about avoiding the recognition of your own power to create reality. It's about refusing to acknowledge that you live in a universe that wants to fulfill your authentic desires, that responds to your consciousness, that's designed to support your expansion rather than limit it. But when you can finally accept this truth, when you can integrate the understanding that success is evidence of your creative power rather than proof of your specialness, when you can embrace the reality that achievement flows from consciousness rather than circumstances, everything shifts. Success stops feeling like something that happens to you and starts feeling like something that happens through you. Achievement stops seeming like an external acquisition and starts revealing itself as an internal expression. This shift dissolves the fear because you're no longer afraid of success changing you. You understand that success is you, expressed in form. You're no longer worried about deserving achievement because you recognize that achievement is simply consciousness manifested. You're no longer concerned about handling success because you realize that the same awareness that created it can navigate it. The fear of success transforms into excitement about what wants to emerge through your unique consciousness. Instead of worrying about whether you're worthy of your dreams, you become curious about what your dreams are trying to teach you about reality. Instead of being terrified of your power, you start getting fascinated by how consciousness creates form, how intention shapes experience, how belief determines outcomes. This is the ultimate reframe that dissolves the fear at its root. Success isn't something foreign that threatens to invade your life. It's something natural that wants to emerge from your life. Achievement isn't an external goal you have to chase. It's an internal reality you have to allow. Abundance isn't a prize you have to win. It's a frequency you have to embody. When you understand success as the natural expression of consciousness aligned with authentic desire, when you recognize achievement as the inevitable outcome of beliefs matched with actions, when you see abundance as the default state of a universe that's fundamentally creative, then pursuing your dreams stops feeling like swimming upstream and starts feeling like flowing with the current of life itself. But this understanding brings its own form of terror. Because if success is natural, if achievement is available, if abundance is your birthright, then what excuse do you have for not living the life you truly want? What justification remains for settling for less than your authentic desires? What protection do you have from the responsibility of creating the reality your soul is calling for? This is where the rubber meets the road in your relationship with success. It's one thing to understand intellectually that you have creative power. It's another thing entirely to wield that power consciously, consistently, courageously. It's one thing to recognize that success is possible. It's another thing to do the inner work that makes it inevitable. It's one thing to see that abundance is available. It's another thing to become the person who can receive it, maintain it, and share it wisely. The fear of success ultimately dissolves when you realize that the real question isn't whether you can achieve what you want. It's whether you're willing to become who you need to be to sustain what you achieve. Not through force or effort or manipulation, but through evolution. Through the gradual expansion of your capacity to hold more joy, more abundance, more influence, more love. Through the patient development of your ability to remain centered in success, authentic in achievement, humble in power. This is the work that transforms fear into excitement, resistance into readiness, self-sabotage into self-support. It's the recognition that success isn't a destination you arrive at, but a frequency you learn to embody. Not a prize you win, but a way of being you cultivate. Not something you achieve once, but something you choose again and again, moment by moment, decision by decision. Your fear of success has been trying to protect you from something that doesn't actually exist. The version of success that would destroy you, that would corrupt you, that would separate you from love, that would demand you sacrifice your authenticity for achievement. But that version of success was never real. It was a projection, a shadow, a distortion of what authentic success actually is. Real success doesn't diminish you, it expands you. It doesn't corrupt you, it reveals you. It doesn't separate you from others. It connects you more deeply to those who are also committed to growth. It doesn't require you to sacrifice your values. It demands that you live them more fully. It doesn't threaten your authenticity. It insists on it. When you can see success clearly, when you can distinguish between authentic achievement and its counterfeit versions, when you can pursue your dreams without compromising your integrity, then the fear begins to transform into something entirely different. It becomes fuel for your growth, energy for your expansion, excitement for your evolution. The question is no longer whether you should pursue success. It's what kind of success you want to create. Not the kind that requires you to betray yourself, but the kind that demands you become yourself. Not the achievement that asks you to sacrifice your soul, but the accomplishment that insists you express it. Not the success that separates you from your humanity, but the fulfillment that connects you more deeply to it. This is your invitation to rewrite your relationship with achievement, to heal your connection to your own power, to embrace the possibility that your success could be a gift, not just to yourself but to everyone whose life you touch. The world needs what you came here to contribute. It needs your unique gifts expressed at their highest level. It needs your authentic success as proof that dreams can manifest, that potential can be fulfilled, that ordinary humans can create extraordinary realities. The fear of success has served its purpose, but its time is ending. What wants to emerge now is something far more beautiful, far more powerful, far more aligned with who you really are. Not fear of your magnificence, but celebration of it. Not resistance to your power, but reverence for it. Not terror of your success, but trust in it, because you are not here to play small. You are not here to hide your gifts. You are not here to settle for less than your authentic desires. You are here to discover what becomes possible when a human being stops fearing their own greatness and starts expressing it. You are here to find out what happens when someone chooses success, not as escape from themselves, but as the ultimate return to themselves. The only thing more terrifying than your fear of success is the possibility that you might never overcome it. That you might spend your entire life running from the very thing your soul came here to create. That you might take your gifts to the grave, unexpressed and unshared. That you might let fear win the most important battle of your existence, the battle for your right to be everything you were born to become. But perhaps the greatest tragedy isn't just taking your gifts to the grave unexpressed, it's living an entire lifetime convinced that your dreams were somehow selfish, that your desires were too grand, that your vision for your life was unrealistic. It's spending decades apologizing for wanting more, dimming your ambition to make others comfortable, editing your goals to fit other people's expectations of what someone like you should aspire to achieve. This is the insidious nature of the fear of success. It doesn't just prevent you from achieving your goals, it convinces you that your goals aren't worth achieving. It doesn't just block your path to fulfillment, it makes you question whether fulfillment is something you deserve. It doesn't just keep you from expressing your gifts, it makes you forget you have gifts worth expressing. You begin to rationalize your limitation. You develop sophisticated explanations for why dreaming smaller is actually wiser, why wanting less is more spiritual, why staying in your current circumstances is more realistic. You become an expert at talking yourself out of the very things your soul is calling you toward. You master the art of self-persuasion, convincing yourself that mediocrity is actually a choice rather than a default, that playing small is actually humility rather than fear. I've watched brilliant individuals construct elaborate philosophies around why they shouldn't pursue their deepest desires. The artist who convinces themselves that commercial success would compromise their integrity. The entrepreneur who decides that building wealth would make them materialistic. The healer who believes that charging for their gifts would corrupt their spiritual purpose. The writer who determines that seeking recognition would feed their ego. All of these beliefs contain kernels of truth, which makes them particularly seductive. Success can corrupt, wealth can become an obsession, recognition can inflate the ego. But using these possibilities as excuses to avoid pursuing your authentic path isn't wisdom. It's sophisticated cowardice. It's using the shadow aspects of achievement to justify remaining in the shadow of your own potential. The question isn't whether success has dangers. It does. The question is whether you trust yourself enough to navigate those dangers consciously. Whether you believe in your capacity to remain authentic while achieving, to stay grounded while ascending, to keep your heart open while your influence expands. The fear of success often masks a deeper fear of your own integrity, your own character, your own ability to handle power without being corrupted by it. This lack of self-trust creates a peculiar form of paralysis. You don't move toward your goals because you don't trust yourself to handle achieving them. You don't pursue your dreams because you're afraid of who you might become if they came true. You don't claim your power because you're terrified of how you might use it. You remain small not because you can't be big, but because you don't trust big you. But here's what this self-distrust reveals. You've been conditioned to believe that power corrupts, that success changes people for the worse, that achievement inevitably leads to arrogance and disconnection. You've absorbed these beliefs so completely that you assume they apply to you as well. You project onto your future successful self all the negative qualities you've observed in others who've achieved what you want. This projection becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy of avoidance. Because you expect success to corrupt you, you avoid success. Because you anticipate achievement changing you negatively, you prevent achievement. Because you assume power will make you arrogant, you refuse power. You protect others from the person you fear you'll become by ensuring you never become that person through never becoming successful at all. The irony is exquisite. Your concern about how success might negatively change you is actually evidence of the consciousness that would prevent such changes. The people who become corrupted by achievement are usually those who pursue it unconsciously, who seek success to fill inner voids, who use accomplishment to avoid facing their shadows. They're not worried about how success might change them because they're not paying attention to the process of change. You, on the other hand, are already examining your motivations, questioning your desires, considering the implications of achievement on your character. This level of self-awareness is precisely what protects against the negative aspects of success you fear. Your consciousness about the dangers of achievement is your safeguard against those very dangers. Yet the fear persists because beneath your concern about being corrupted by success lies an even deeper terror. You're not just afraid of becoming someone you don't like through achievement. You're afraid of discovering that you already are someone you don't like, and that success will simply reveal it. You're terrified that accomplishment won't corrupt you, but will expose corruption that already exists. That recognition won't make you arrogant, but will unveil arrogance that's already present. That power won't change you, but will amplify who you already are. This is the shadow work that success demands, the inner archaeology that achievement requires. You must excavate your own darkness before you can safely hold light. You must face your capacity for selfishness before you can be trusted with abundance. You must acknowledge your potential for cruelty before you can wield power with compassion. You must own your existing flaws before success can magnify your virtues instead of your vices. The fear of success becomes a teacher, pointing you toward the aspects of yourself that need attention before you can safely expand. It's not trying to keep you small forever. It's trying to ensure you're prepared for bigness when it arrives. It's not attempting to prevent your growth. It's insisting that your growth include depth as well as height, shadow integration as well as light expression, character development as well as skill acquisition. This understanding transforms your relationship with the fear from adversarial to collaborative. Instead of fighting against your resistance to success, you begin working with it. Instead of trying to overcome your hesitation through force, you start exploring what your hesitation is trying to teach you. Instead of pushing through your blocks, you begin examining what your blocks are protecting you from and preparing you for. The work becomes archaeological, psychological, spiritual. You excavate your family patterns around money, power, recognition, achievement. You examine your beliefs about what success means, what it costs, what it demands. You investigate your assumptions about successful people, about the relationship between accomplishment and character, about the price of getting what you want. This excavation often reveals surprising discoveries. Perhaps you're not afraid of success itself, but of a particular type of success that you witnessed in your family growing up. Maybe you're not terrified of achievement, but of a specific form of achievement that violated your values. Possibly you're not resisting recognition, but the kind of recognition that required others to sacrifice their authenticity. It's the more specific you become about what exactly you're afraid of, the more clearly you can distinguish between authentic concerns and inherited programming. You begin to separate your genuine wisdom about the challenges of success from the fear-based stories you've absorbed about achievement. You start to differentiate between your authentic values and the limiting beliefs you've mistaken for virtue. This discernment allows you to pursue success consciously rather than reactively. You can seek achievement that aligns with your values rather than contradicts them. You can create abundance that serves your purpose rather than undermines it. You can build recognition that honors your authenticity rather than requires you to perform a false version of yourself. The fear begins to transform from an obstacle into guidance. It helps you identify which opportunities align with your integrity and which ones would require you to compromise it. It assists you in recognizing which paths would support your growth and which ones would stunt it. It guides you toward the kind of success that would expand your capacity to love rather than diminish it. But this conscious approach to success requires something that unconscious achievement doesn't demand. It requires you to slow down, to reflect, to choose deliberately rather than react automatically. It asks you to consider not just whether you can achieve something, but whether achieving it would serve your highest good and the highest good of others. It demands that you evaluate opportunities not just based on their potential for external reward, but on their capacity to support your internal development. This slower, more conscious approach to success often triggers another layer of fear. In a culture that celebrates speed, that rewards quick achievement, that idolizes overnight success, taking time to develop yourself before pursuing your goals can feel like falling behind. You watch others rush toward their objectives while you're doing inner work. And part of you wonders if you're making excuses, if you're overcomplicating things, if you're using personal development as another form of procrastination. This doubt is understandable because there is a fine line between conscious preparation and sophisticated avoidance. Between doing the inner work that success requires and using inner work to avoid the outer work that success also demands. Between developing yourself to handle achievement and developing yourself instead of pursuing achievement. The key is in the intention, the energy, the direction of your preparation. Conscious preparation moves you toward your goals, even if indirectly. It builds your capacity to handle what you're working toward. It develops the skills, perspectives, and character traits that achievement will require. It's preparation that serves success rather than substituting for it. Avoidance disguised as preparation, on the other hand, moves you away from your goals or keeps you circling around them without actually approaching them. It focuses on readiness without ever declaring yourself ready. It emphasizes development without ever applying that development to real-world challenges. The difference lies not in the activities themselves, but in their relationship to forward movement. Conscious preparation accelerates your journey towards success by ensuring you're equipped to handle it when it arrives. Unconscious avoidance delays your journey by creating endless prerequisites that must be met before you can begin pursuing what you actually want. Learning to distinguish between these two requires brutal honesty with yourself. It demands that you examine whether your current activities are truly preparing you for success or protecting you from it. Whether your focus on inner development is serving your growth or substituting for action. Whether your commitment to becoming ready is moving you closer to your goals or keeping you safely distant from them. This self-examination often reveals uncomfortable truths. Perhaps you've been using meditation to avoid making difficult decisions. Maybe you've been focusing on healing to postpone taking risks. Possibly you've been emphasizing authenticity to justify staying in your comfort zone. The spiritual path can become as much of a prison as any other path when it's used to avoid rather than embrace the fullness of life. True spiritual development doesn't lead away from worldly engagement, but toward more conscious engagement with the world. It doesn't encourage withdrawal from achievement, but more authentic achievement. It doesn't promote avoidance of success, but success that serves not just your personal fulfillment, but your spiritual evolution and your contribution to collective healing. This integration of spiritual development and worldly achievement is perhaps the most challenging aspect of pursuing authentic success. It requires you to hold seemingly contradictory energies simultaneously. Ambition and surrender, drive and acceptance, personal will and divine will, desire and detachment, action and being, goal orientation and present moment awareness. Most people resolve this tension by choosing one side or the other. They either pursue success unconsciously, driven by ego and fear, or they avoid success consciously, hiding behind the spiritual concepts that justify limitation. But the path of integrated achievement requires you to hold both, to pursue your goals with passion while remaining unattached to outcomes, to work diligently toward your dreams while trusting the process completely. This paradoxical approach to success dissolves much of the fear because you're no longer pursuing achievement from a place of desperation or need. You're not chasing success to prove your worth or fill an inner void or escape your current circumstances. You're creating outcomes that align with your values and serve your growth while remaining open to the possibility that life might have different or better plans than the ones you've conceived. The fear of success often stems from the assumption that pursuing your goals means forcing them into existence through sheer will and effort. That achievement requires you to control outcomes, manipulate circumstances, and override any obstacles that appear in your path. This approach to success is exhausting, stressful, and ultimately self-defeating because it puts you at war with reality instead of in partnership with it. But there's another way to pursue your dreams, one that dissolves much of the resistance and fear. Instead of trying to force success to happen, you can create the conditions in which success becomes likely. Instead of attempting to control outcomes, you can align with the forces that create outcomes. Instead of fighting against obstacles, you can learn from them and work with them as guidance toward more effective approaches. This shift from forcing to allowing, from controlling to aligning, from fighting to flowing, transforms the entire experience of pursuing success. It becomes less about conquest and more about collaboration, less about proving yourself worthy and more about expressing yourself authentically, less about getting what you want and more about becoming who you need to be for what you want to emerge naturally through your life. The fear begins to dissolve because you're no longer approaching success as something outside yourself that you must capture or achieve. You're recognizing it as something inside yourself that wants to express itself through your unique gifts, perspectives, and contributions. You're not chasing success, you're becoming success. You're not pursuing achievement, you're embodying it. This embodiment approach to success requires a fundamental shift in identity. Instead of seeing yourself as someone who wants to be successful, you begin identifying as someone who is success expressing itself in human form. Instead of viewing achievement as something you hope to attain, you recognize it as something you are designed to manifest. Instead of thinking of your goals as distant possibilities, you understand them as inevitable outcomes of your continued alignment and action. This isn't positive thinking or wishful fantasy. It's a recognition of how consciousness creates reality, how identity shapes experience, how being precedes doing, which precedes having. When you embody the energy of success, when you align with the frequency of achievement, when you identify with the essence of accomplishment, you naturally begin making choices, taking actions, and creating circumstances that reflect that inner state. The fear of success becomes irrelevant because you're not trying to become someone different through achievement. You're allowing someone you already are to express themselves more fully. You're not seeking to acquire something foreign. You're permitting something natural to emerge. You're not attempting to force change. You're allowing evolution. This evolution happens gradually, organically, sustainably. It doesn't require you to shock your system by suddenly leaping into a completely different life. It invites you to gradually expand your capacity, slowly increase your visibility, steadily develop your influence. It honors your need for integration time, for adjustment periods, for the natural rhythm of growth that includes both expansion and consolidation phases. The fear of success often assumes that achievement happens all at once, that you go from struggling to successful overnight, that there's no transition period between your current reality and your desired outcomes. But authentic success unfolds progressively, allowing you to develop the skills and perspectives needed at each level before advancing to the next one. It provides apprenticeships in power, internships in influence, training grounds for the responsibilities that greater achievement brings. This progressive approach to success means you don't have to figure out how to handle ultimate achievement from your current vantage point. You only need to prepare for the next level of expression, the immediate expansion that's calling to you now. As you master each stage, you naturally develop the capacity for the next one. As you integrate each achievement, you organically prepare for greater ones. The paralysis that comes from contemplating the enormous gap between where you are and where you want to be begins to dissolve when you focus on the next right step rather than the ultimate destination. The overwhelm that comes from considering all the changes success might require becomes manageable when you concentrate on the changes that today's growth is asking of you. This step-by-step approach to success allows your nervous system to adjust gradually to increased visibility, expanded responsibility, and greater influence. It gives your relationships time to evolve as you evolve, your identity time to integrate new levels of capability, your character time to develop the wisdom that power requires. It honors the natural pace of sustainable growth rather than forcing the artificial speed of unsustainable breakthrough. But even with this gentler approach to achievement, even with the recognition that success can unfold gradually and organically, the fear still sometimes arises because there's another layer of resistance that lives even deeper in the human psyche. Beyond the fear of change, beyond the terror of responsibility, beyond the anxiety about social dynamics, there exists a more fundamental fear that touches the very core of what it means to be human. You are afraid of your own magnificence, not just your capability or your potential or your power, but the sheer radiance of who you actually are when you're not dimming yourself to fit in, not editing yourself to avoid threatening others, not playing small to maintain the comfort of those around you. You are terrified of the full expression of your authentic self because some part of you suspects that full expression would be so beautiful, so powerful, so luminous that it would fundamentally alter reality around you. This fear of your own magnificence is perhaps the most sacred fear you carry because it points to something true about your nature. You are not just a human being having a spiritual experience. You are a spiritual being having a human experience, and when that spiritual essence begins to shine through your human personality without filters or limitations, it creates what can only be described as magic. The fear of this magic, this luminosity, this sacred radiance that wants to express itself through your unique human form, is what ultimately keeps you from stepping fully into your power. Because at some level, you know that when you stop hiding, when you cease playing small, when you allow your authentic self to shine without apology or limitation, you become a force of nature that cannot be ignored, contained, or controlled by others. This recognition brings us to the heart of what the fear of success is really protecting you from discovering. Not that you might fail at achieving your dreams, but that you might succeed so completely at expressing your authentic nature that you remember who you really are, and who you really are is so much more magnificent than who you've been pretending to be, that the revelation would shatter every limitation you've ever accepted as real. The fear of success is ultimately the fear of your own divinity, the terror of discovering that you are not separate from the creative force of the universe, but an expression of it. The anxiety about realizing that your dreams are not random wishes, but divine assignments. The resistance to accepting that your success is not personal achievement, but cosmic orchestration working through your willing participation. When you understand that your fear of success is actually reverence for the sacred power that wants to express itself through your life, when you recognize that your resistance to achievement is actually respect for the magnitude of what you're capable of creating, when you see that your hesitation about stepping into your power is actually humility in the face of the divine force that you are, then the fear begins to transform into something entirely different. It becomes awe, wonder, gratitude for being chosen as a vessel for forces larger than your individual personality, excitement about discovering what wants to emerge through your unique combination of gifts, experiences, and perspectives, curiosity about how the universe wants to express itself through your particular form of consciousness. This shift from fear to reverence, from resistance to collaboration, from hiding to expressing, marks the beginning of your actual relationship with authentic success. Not success as personal achievement, but success as divine expression. Not accomplishment as individual conquest, but accomplishment as collaborative creation with the intelligence that animates all life. From this perspective, your success becomes not about you, but through you. Your achievement becomes not for you, but through you for the healing and awakening of the world. Your power becomes not yours, but the universe's power, expressing itself through your willingness to serve something greater than your small self. And in this recognition, the fear of success finally dissolves completely, because you're no longer afraid of what success might do to you. You're excited about what success might do through you. You're no longer concerned about whether you deserve achievement. You're curious about what wants to be achieved through your life. You're no longer worried about handling power. You're honored to be a conduit for power in service of love. This is the ultimate transformation of the fear of success, from terror of your own magnificence to celebration of it, from resistance to your power to reverence for it, from hiding your light to letting it shine so brightly that others remember their own light, from playing small to protect others' comfort to expressing your fullness to inspire others' growth. The world is not served by your playing small. It is not helped by your hiding your gifts. It is not healed by your limitation. The world needs your success, your achievement, your full expression of the divine nature that you are. Not success that serves your ego, but success that serves love. Not achievement that separates you from others, but accomplishment that connects you more deeply to the whole. Your fear of success has been the guardian at the threshold of your own transformation. It has protected you until you were ready to handle the magnitude of who you really are. But now, perhaps, you are ready. Ready to step across that threshold, ready to claim your power, ready to express your magnificence, ready to succeed not just for yourself, but for all of life that is waiting for your unique contribution to the grand symphony of existence. The question is no longer whether you will overcome your fear of success. The question is whether you will allow your fear to transform into the fuel for your greatest expression. Whether you will let your resistance become the raw material for your most authentic achievement. Whether you will permit your terror of your own magnificence to become celebration of the divine nature that you are and have always been, waiting patiently for you to stop hiding and start shining.